Hello and welcome back to the Business Growth Club. This is your weekly edition from us, and in this week's edition we're going to be looking at how you can profile your target market. Now, I'm always talking about the importance of target markets, and they are crucially important. And by now, on the journey with the Business Growth Club, you know that broadly you should have a target market. However, sometimes there's a bit of a disconnection between who you profile as your target market and then your marketing activities, because you say, I know this is my target market, I want to target affluent people or poor people or rural people or urban people, so that's my target market. I've looked at my business and I know they're the people who already buy, they're the people that profit comes from, they're the people I want to do business with. On my 80-20, they're the 20 that give me the 80% of my profits. However, how does that affect my marketing tactics and what do I do? So you got a bit of a disconnection failure, and the point of this video and the videos that follow, because this is a series, is to show you how you can use the tools that are available today, which cost you nothing, which can actually help you to profile so that you can take your broad target market, you can translate it into reachable groups into a targeting tool, so then outcomes of the other side is your marketing strategy. Now, it is a bit of a journey, and today we're going to be looking at how you can start that journey and some of the initial concepts. Now, it all starts with the idea of not having a mass market. Now, it has no place in today's world because we simply don't need one. They're overly expensive, they give you too much of a distraction, they consume too much of your budget, and they don't work as well as a targeted approach. Now, you know that already. But like I say, we're going to look at how we actually categorize your target market into reachable groups so that whatever marketing you want to do, whether it's telephone, whether it's direct mail, whether it's advertising, whatever it happens to be, you can actually have a profile that you can go to. So we're really going to look at your target market and take it into a lot more detail. Now, as I've said, this is a series, so today's video we're just going to be introducing you to some of the very basic concepts. And I've used the idea of business to consumer, so businesses that sell to regular domestic population, consumers as they're called, so not businesses basically. However, if you sell to businesses, you're a business that sells to businesses, keep watching because it's important that you pick up on some of the concepts, because I'm going to be explaining the tools and the concepts both for business to consumer and business to business. Now, whilst the tools are different, the concepts are the same, and it's almost the theory is the same. So I'd encourage you to watch all of the videos, because whether you're business to consumer or business to business, if you watch all of them, you'll see the full picture. And this really is a sort of series where you've got to bring everything together. Now, what we're talking about in simple terms is represented in this picture here. It's about focus. It's about you saying, well, actually, there are lots of different groups out there. Some of them are bigger than others, as you can see in this picture, but really I want the white ones, not the blue ones. They're the people, the ones in the middle, they're the people that I really need to be talking to. And today, and the rest of the videos in this series, are all about how you find those people. Now, it may surprise you to learn that the solution to your problem of profiling your target market comes in the shape of a mosaic. Now, you know what a mosaic is. It's simply taking different bits of material, be it glass or stone or whatever, and you take little different ones, different colours, and together you form a beautiful picture. So every single individual part of this doesn't give you a big picture. However, altogether they form a big picture, a mosaic. Now, the Macedonians were the first known people to use mosaics, and they were just using it to produce something which was very beautiful and very ornamental. However, today we've taken this concept and we've actually said that a mosaic is exactly what society is. It's a number of different groups that together form the whole of society. Now, for your marketing, you want to profile not the whole of this picture, not all of these individual pieces, but just the individual piece or pieces that is your target market. Now, that might sound a little bit abstract until I explain to you that Experian, who you know are a very big data profiling and data research company, have developed a tool that they call a mosaic, their mosaic targeting tool. So it works exactly as I've said on the basis of a mosaic. We have lots of different individual pieces, all different shapes and colours and sizes, and together they form a beautiful picture. That is our society. Now, for our marketing, we want to say that whilst there is that beautiful picture that is society, we just want as our target market, as our profile customer, the people we want to talk to, is just one of those individual pieces. So one of the pieces that make up the big picture. And as I say, this tool has been developed by Experian. It's called Mosaic UK, and it's a system basically to classify every UK household into different groups. So they're the different pieces that make up our mosaic. Now, if you're interested in the history, it was actually developed by a very well-respected Professor Richard Webber in the 1980s in conjunction with Experian, and it is a very well-respected targeting tool. I will say in the UK it's the most well-respected. Now, that's an opinion, but if you want the benefit of my opinion, I would say that Experian is the tool you want to use. Now, it's regularly updated. As I say, it came from the 1980s, but it's updated crucially on the new census, and also other information from market research and other available urban and social trends. But fundamentally, you don't need to worry too much about how it all comes together. You just need to know that it's a targeting tool that you can use, and it's well respected, and it's noted crucially for its accuracy and also its depth. So it looks at a decent profiling of a country in terms of the depth. It's not superficial. It's not just rich and poor or urban and rural. It kind of really splits up society, and it's also accurate because it goes off stuff like the census, which is incredibly accurate. We seem to forget in this country just how brilliant the census is. Whether or not you agree with it from a political perspective is a bit of an irrelevance when it comes to marketing. The census gives you an incredible depth of information, and actually not many countries have that depth of information. So it's very accurate and very deep. Now, at the top level, and today I'm just going to show you the top level, just to introduce you to the ideas behind this. And as I say, we're going to do future videos where the full picture will become obvious to you. But today we're just going to look at how the mosaic actually brings together the individual consumer groups. And it says in the UK there are 11 main social groups. Now this is actually from a 2004. There is a 2010 edition, however, I want to show you the earlier version because it helps to explain the theory, and actually some of the developments in the later version are still being refined, and it's maybe not as good as it will be in a couple of years' time. So I want to start at the beginning. Like I say, most of this will become obvious when you watch the full series, but today I just want to introduce you to the idea that society is a mosaic. You just want the individual groups in that mosaic, so the little pieces, you just want the one or few pieces that make up your target market, and the Experian tool helps you to identify them. So we have this tool which splits society into 11 main social groups. So they're the 11 main groups, and you want one or more of them to be your target market. Now, sometimes people can wonder about the political correctness of putting people into different social groups. Now, this is not done to be politically incorrect. It's merely done because you have to put society into boxes in order to make sense of it. You have to say, okay, society falls into 11 different groups. Otherwise, your only alternative is to say that we're all one big group. Now, in the strictest sense, we are, and everybody bucks a trend. And whenever you put people in a box, it doesn't fully work. However, it works better than saying there's 62 million people. Saying that 4% of the population fall into this group, and that group is most likely to be your target market, well, that means for every 100 people, you just need to spend money talking to 4 of them. That's much better than saying, okay, I'm going to spend money speaking to all 100 of them, because you can't afford to do that on any great scale. So whilst it is putting people in boxes, and whilst that does have a margin for error, although the margin for error has been massively mitigated over the years because we get such dynamic information, especially from consumer trends now and the power of the internet and all the rest of it. But yes, there is a margin for error, but that doesn't really matter, because the margin for error in sending your message to 62 million people is massive, whereas your margin for error on targeting a certain group might be 0.5, so it might be 1 in every 200 people where you make a mistake. Or you could be making a mistake by talking to everybody. So put your political convictions aside and just say, okay, it is a little politically incorrect if you want to be kind of liberal about it and worry about putting people in boxes. But it's not about judging people. It's about saying, who's the most likely target market for my business? Now, as I say, the groups we're about to see, the ones at the Mosaic UK by Experian profile as the 11 broad social groups, is for consumers. However, it works just as well for businesses, and next week I'll talk about how businesses will look and what different groups they fall into. But please watch this, whether you're business or consumer, because the full picture is quite important. So now we're going to meet these 11 different social groups, and I'm going to show you when you meet them how some of these may or may not be your target market, and then how that could help you in your marketing. So let's have a look at the first group. Now these just come in the format that Experian present them in their 2004 matrix. So I've not put the best group first and the last group last. I have no opinions. For different businesses out there, different groups will be the best group. I have clients who have target markets who are the richest people or the poorest people. It depends completely what you're selling. So it doesn't really matter. Nobody's making any judgments by what these groups fall into. However, some are more affluent than others, some are more educated, some are more successful, some are more entrepreneurial, some are more creative, some are more old-fashioned, some are more radical. So no one's making any judgments, when I present these. I've not put them in order of the ones I like or dislike or any other political kind of, rubbish. These are just presented in the way they happen to be in the book, so to speak. So don't worry about, targeting the first ones or not the last ones. Target the one that makes sense, and I'll explain this as we meet the different groups. So let's get started and have a look at group number 1. Now, group number 1 they call symbols of success. This is the most affluent 10% of the population. Now, as I say, that doesn't make them the best 10% because it doesn't necessarily mean that they will work for your business. If your business sells, say, a cheap car, say a second-hand car, you probably don't want these people. They're probably no good to you because a cheap second-hand car for, I don't know, £2,000 is not going to sell to this group, and it probably won't even sell to their children because most of these people are of a certain age where they have what we call semi-grown-up children, which are kind of that bizarre age between 16 and 25 when they're an adult but they're still dependent economically on their parents. These people are more likely to buy them a brand new car, albeit a small car. So if you sold, like I say, cheap second-hand cars, this group wouldn't work for you. If you sold brand new little cars, like a brand new Ford Fiesta, well, maybe this would work for their children, but it wouldn't work for them. This would be more if you were selling nice Audis, nice BMWs, nice Mercedes, nice Range Rovers, those types of cars. So do you see how this group symbols of success doesn't actually mean they're the best or the worst, but they are the wealthiest 10%. So what does this tell us? Now, Experian will tell us that it's 9.62% of the population, so 10% of the population. Now, Experian like to tell you the 2 most popular male and female names, and I've put them in these because sometimes it can be just a little bit funny and we can all make a bit of a joke of it, but it doesn't mean very much. But they say that the most populous names in this group is Rupert or Felicity, which is probably just a little bit funny, but don't pay too much attention to the names. They don't mean very much, but I think they're there just because they are a little bit amusing. But don't worry about them. What you need to worry about is the fact that they are upper middle or middle class. Like I said to you in the beginning, sometimes this gets scientific because we have an upper middle, a middle and a lower middle. Quite confusing. But the description below it is less confusing. They're the wealthiest 10% of population. Doesn't include rich landowners because they're too small a group to classify. So the Queen doesn't fall into this because it's too small a group to profile. So don't worry about them. But they've got good careers. They've got substantial equity, which is very useful. If you were looking, say you're a business that's looking for people who are looking for future, say, property development, well, these people have already got substantial equity, so they could have good collateral, but also they've probably got the available funds to do that. And they're advanced in their careers. So if your business helps young people become successful in their careers, and shows people how to leave university or college or whatever and become a successful person, this group is pointless to you because they're already holding senior positions. They're high flyers, so that doesn't work. However, if you are, like I said, a Bentley dealership, then this is your perfect group. Or if you want to show executives how to improve their performance, then this is the group for you. So do you see what I'm saying as I'm talking around these slides? How this would work for a different type of business. So if you are these types of businesses I'm mentioning, 100% of a population, all 62 million doesn't help. Whereas automatically we've just drilled this down to 9.62% of the population, and maybe this is your target market. Maybe it's this group and some other groups we're going to look at. But if it was this group, that means you only need to be talking to 10% of the population, which makes your marketing significantly less expensive. Also, you might decide you're just going to sell to people in Manchester because that's your drive time, that's your, the area you work in. So it's just 10% of the population in Manchester. Now that might be a population of a few million, and you've managed to drill down just 10% of it. Much more effective. You can reach 10%. And I'm going to show you later some of the tools you can use from Experian that allow you to target these people. That's the whole purpose of this. I'm not just telling you these groups because they're interesting. I'm telling you them. I'm asking you to say which one relates to your business. And then after that, I'm going to say this is, the tools you can use. We'll look at them in a lot more detail next week. But fundamentally, this is how it works. Now, the final column here is quite important because this tells you how you reach these people with your marketing. And this says that these people are most likely to watch just a little bit of television, and they're more likely to be on the internet. So that's interesting, isn't it? So if you want to reach this group, traditional advertising, it's probably less likely to work. Television, well, if you pick the right channels, might work, but actually they're on the internet. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because this group are probably more likely to be familiar with computers in their everyday life. So we'll find them on the internet. Okay, that's interesting. When we look at some other groups, they're not so much on the internet, and that's where it becomes even more interesting. So this informs your marketing. So that's group number 1. Group number 2 is called Happy Families. These are again 10% of the population, 10.76. And these are the middle class again, or the lower middle class. So what does that mean? Well, these are families from Middle England. So that means they're worried about their children, their home and their career, and they live in new suburbs in more prosperous areas. So dare I say it, kind of Barrett House. That's kind of where these people live. Well, that's interesting. It's interesting that we say these people are worried about their children and the first group aren't. There could be lots of reasons for that. Maybe their children, like I say, are 16 to 25, so they're more grown up, less need to worry about them. Whereas this group has younger children, so their children might be 10 and they're coming up to school, or they might be 15 and they're sitting their GCSEs, or 17 and sitting their A-levels. So they're worried about that. They're worried about their home. So this is the group you want to be targeting if you're a home improvement, not the first group. That's interesting, isn't it? We know these people from social research are more interested in making a happy, nice home. So you might imagine it's the richest 10%, but actually it's the middle and the lower middle. So if you are a home improvements business that's reasonably premium, reasonably high service, don't go for group number 1, go for group number 2. Interesting. And you know where they live, you know the sort of houses they live in. So you can kind of predict the type of stuff they want. Now this group, interestingly, they're on the internet as well. You'd expect that because, again, they're probably a group very familiar with the internet. But notice group number 1 watches television. This group watches Sky Television. Now that's fundamentally different. Because when you watch television, there's only 5 channels, and 2 of those you can't advertise on. So that's quite limited, isn't it? And most of us can't afford even regionalised advertising on ITV. It's probably just too expensive. However, Sky Television is totally different, much cheaper. You might decide that these people are interested on say the Living channel, I believe there is on Sky, which is all about home improvements and these location type programs and home improvements. Now advertising on that is significantly less expensive, and you can do regionalised in many of the networks. So that's and these people are interested in home improvements. All of a sudden a bigger picture appears, doesn't it? All of this comes together. So that's that group, Happy Families. Very different to the first group, even though their income is not that different, and you probably imagine they look quite similar. But if you were going to go for group number 1 and group number 2, now you know whether to go to just 2 or just 1, and you've cut down from 20% to 10%. All of a sudden this helps a lot more. As I'm presenting these groups, you need to be saying, are these my target market? Like I say, if you're interested in showing people how to advance in their career, maybe even have a second income, this might be your group. Whereas if you want to show people how to advance in their career and get a second income, the first group doesn't really resonate with that. They're about peak performance. So that might be executive coaching, not showing people how to take their salary from £32,000 to £45,000. Now, to many of you listening to this, going from £32,000 to £45,000 might not sound very important, because in a business that's just, one good product, or it's just a good marketing campaign. It's kind of chicken feed money. But to somebody who is an employee, who has a fixed income, Actually, being stuck at 32,000, it's not like having a business. You can't just get some good marketing going. You can't just, rattle the tin with your customers a bit better. You can't just bring in some extra product lines or have a good upsell, cross-sell or whatever. You're stuck at 32,000. You're stuck in middle management and you want to go to senior management. Now, if you're the sort of company that helps people to do that, then this is the group you want to go to, because to them, 32,000 to 45,000 is massively different. Massively different. It takes you from affording a semi-detached 3-bedroom home to a detached 4-bedroom home. Massively different. Then we really do journey. That's a massive difference. As I say, often as a business owner, you don't fully recognise these groups because you can really manipulate your income and you're likely to have a very high income. But there are groups like this where they're stuck at a certain range. These are probably the group that are very unlikely to afford independent education for their children, but they're worried about their children. And their children might be coming up to GCSE or A-level, and they want to get them into the best university because they want their children to have a good job and, to have all the advantages that education can give you in life. So this is the real group to tap into. So if you are a business, and I was talking to a business like this the other day, who helps children who are struggling a little bit get through their GCSEs and A-levels, then this is the target market. So if you were saying we're this type of business and we help kids improve their exam performance, and we have no idea how we target, because who could it be? Is it poor people? Is it rich people? Who is it? Is it this type of town? That area of town? It's difficult. All of a sudden, now you just know it's happy families, and it's just this 11% of the population. Now you can drill down into a little bit more detail when you do your targeting, and I'll talk about that in the future. But fundamentally, this is the group for you. So do you see how you might have thought, is it the first group? But it isn't the first group, because they've got too much money. They're sending people to expensive schools. They're spending 15, 20, 30,000 pounds a year on a school. They don't need your help. Whereas this group can't afford that, but desperately want their children to do well. One of our most basic instincts, isn't it, is to get a better life for children. So if that's your type of business, of course your business could be anything. I'm just using examples as these slides present themselves to me. But do you see how this helps you profile so much? Okay, suburban comfort is the next group, and these are the lower middle class, and these are an interesting group actually, because I can tell you based on experience, these are an incredibly difficult group to do any marketing to, because they're lower middle class, so they're kind of on, let's say 25 to 30k a year, which is not a great income, but it's above average. It's lower middle class. They're 15% of the population, but they're not ambitious. They're a really difficult group to tap into because they live in comfortable homes in mature suburbs. We classify this as kind of after the First World War up to the 1970s, and they've got fairly alright incomes, but they're not very ambitious, and they're a really difficult group to crack. And they're 15% of the population, but maybe this is your target market. If you are a conservatory company, if you are a landscaping company, if you do some moderate home improvements, if you do, carpets and or furniture, or double glazing, if you want to sell someone a cheap caravan, these might be your group. Number two will also be your group, but this might just be. But if you want that coaching their children or coaching them to get a bigger income, don't bother. They're not an ambitious group. I can tell you this from experience. So they're a funny group with suburban comfort. I think they're called suburban comfort because obviously they're suburban, but they are they're very comfortable. I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be. They're not that ambitious, unlike happy families. Happy families are a bit more ambitious, and they're a lot more conscientious, and they're a lot more developmental. And group number one's very aggressive because they're already a high earner and they're already a high flyer, and they want to be even more successful. Whereas this group's a tricky little group. But like I say, if you want to sell, reasonably priced conservatories or double glazing, this is great. If you can offer people a payment plan, so you do your double glazing, but you can do it over 36 months because you've got a finance agreement, this is your group. It'll work very well with this group because they've got alright incomes, but they've probably not got a spare 10 grand to spend on the new conservatory, but they can probably spread the payments over, over 36 months. Now, group number 4 is ties of community. A big group this, it's 16% of the population. They've kind of got moderate incomes again, be it from kind of blue collar or white collar employment, but these are a very interesting group. Their families they generally tend to be more kind of urban or industrialised areas. And they're very focused on local community. They're kind of, they're not quite the people in the League of Gentlemen where you've got to be local to go to the shop, but they will do stuff in their local community. They'll support local charities. They'll go to local shops. So if you are trying to target people in a local area who've got loyalty to the local area, this is your sort of group. Now, what do this group do? Well, they've got the Mirror and the Sun. So that's interesting. Now, once you know one particular media, by the way, if you know the Sun, you also know the other types of advertising that would link with the Sun. But this is the sort of newspapers these people are reading. I think this is more illuminating, not to say what newspapers they read, but the fact that they read newspapers. It tells you something about them. Because a lot of people have stopped reading newspapers, but these people don't do so much on the internet, because that's not a primary marketing medium for them. This is people who read newspapers. So if you want to do a load of online advertising to these people, as a lot of businesses that are targeting this group do, it's probably wasted. You're much more likely to be going for more print-type media, more traditional local advertising. Because if you read these newspapers, they might read the local newspaper or something like this, or more likely to respond to something in the post or a telephone call than something on the internet. Do you see how, if this is your target group, the internet is irrelevant because they don't go on the internet? These are all percentages, of course. It's just not their primary medium. Some of this group, of course, will be on the internet, but do you see how just one bit of information can really help your marketing? Urban intelligence, small group this, it's only 7% of the population. Apparently the most regular names are Ben and Chloe. That's I don't know what that tells you, but there we are. And this is a mixture of the middle classes we've just mentioned, but they're urban. So, less industrialised, more urban. And this tends to be young, educated people. And it includes students. So a lot of people say to me, how do you target students? Well, it's this group here. It's students, and it's interesting, actually. The student economy is not just 18 to 21. It's a misunderstanding. It's up to 25. Because we know in social trends, this group, this urban intelligence, lives the life of a student from the moment that they graduate for the next couple of years. They don't live with their partner, they live with friends, they still go out to bars, they still go out to chains, they still spend most of their money not on pensions, not on housing, not on home improvements, but on actually going out and enjoying themselves. And then they get a bit older and they start a family and they start spending money on more sensible stuff. This group doesn't buy nice cars, it has a cheap car because it can spend more money on alcohol at the weekend and all the rest of it. Now, it's a small group, but they spend a lot of their income on social activities. So if you were starting up a new trendy wine bar, or you've just made some renovations to your wine bar, or you've just tried to target a more young audience, people who've got a bit of money and will come and spend it with you, then this is your group. So all of a sudden, instead of looking at an area and saying, well, we'll just fire everybody, well, this is the people. Now, unsurprisingly, apparently they read The Guardian. Well, somebody's got to, haven't they? Or The Times, or crucially the internet. So you can see that they're quite interesting. They're very, they're very much of the internet generation. They're Facebook and their Twitter and all the rest of it, and they're probably on their smartphones. But they're still reading The Times or The Guardian. Quite left-leaning papers, which you'd expect from this. Young people are always more left-wing, aren't they, than older people? So you can kind of target them here. But it's interesting, isn't it? They're not all just the internet. They still might read something you send them in the post. They still might respond to traditional advertising. So that's group number 5. Group number 6 is what they call the borderline group. This is the group the government's always trying to kind of focus on progressing. And these are 6.5% of the population. And these are kind of, they're poor. They're the poorest people, basically. And they tend to be urban. That's because most poor people can only afford to live in urban areas. It's a bit of an obvious statement. Interestingly, though, these people still have money to spend. And apparently they read The Sun, which is probably unsurprising, but also they have very high TV viewing. So that might help you. There might be that might tell you something about their kind of character. Crucially, they're not on the internet, which is again interesting. We've got this idea, haven't we, that everything in the world is on the internet now. The number of people I meet who tell me all marketing's on the internet. Well, when we actually look at social trends, some of it is, some of it isn't. So this is this group here. And say you're a budget provider, say you're into budget stuff, maybe domestic budget holidays, cheap flights. If you're looking at selling very cheap stuff, maybe you're a store and you've got a cheap sale because you're trying to move stock, that sort of stuff. These people will respond to a bargain. This is your bargain hunters group. They've still got a bit of money, but they are. Yeah, they're still, they're a poor group. Poor people still spend money, but it's obviously they're not going to buy your new Mercedes. So, you've got to look at it that way. Only 6.5% of the population, probably less than you might imagine. Okay, these are people who are basically welfare dependent, this group. They tend to live in very kind of housing estate type areas, and they're dependent on benefits. Again, they read The Sun on high TV viewing. The difference between this group and the other group we just mentioned, the borderline group, is the borderline group are close to benefits, whereas this group are dependent on benefits. And again, they're 6.5% of the population. So between them, they make that kind of 13% in the middle. That's very very dependent and very poor. So again, they're not going to buy your Mercedes, but they might buy, like I say, your budget offering. Even if, as I say, you're a business that sells generally to the kind of, say, the something more like the Happy Families group, but you've got a big kind of discount sale and you want to get people in the door to sell something cheaply just to move stock on or whatever. This is your group. But this group and the other group are probably less likely to be your target, generally because they've got less money to spend. So you'd have to be the sort of organisation that worked on volume. So if you're a volume provider and you know this is your target market, then and that's great if it is, because they're only 13% combined of the population. So do you see how out of this 100 people, you've only got 13 people? How much of your marketing budget does that reduce, or how much more available does that make your marketing? You might be able to talk to all of the people in your local area in this group. This is really the kind of the enterprise economy, group number 8. They call it the blue collar enterprise. It's 11% of the population, so it's as big a group as the Happy Families. It's a kind of big group. Now, they say they're enterprising rather than well educated, which is a funny way of saying that these people are educated, just not in a traditional university, which is kind of very old-fashioned, isn't it? And they say it's kind of white van man. Really what it means is somebody who's very skilled, and it has a kind of skilled area of the economy. So someone who's probably less likely to respond to your advertising about, say, home improvements, because they're more likely to be involved in that sort of world, but might respond to your world where you're looking at kind of, like we say, the children and their education, or if we're looking at, say, a certain type of holiday. This is the sort of people who might go on one type of holiday but not another. It's probably a foreign holiday rather than a domestic holiday because they can afford overseas, but they probably don't want to go to Australia for 3 weeks because they're more likely to go to a resort, a kind of Spanish resort or whatever. You will know who in your business falls into this group. So this is the type of people that if you know that the skilled white man comes to your resort or your business, then this is the group you want to be targeting. So that's how it works really. In all of these groups, you're saying, does this look like my customers or my best customers? And lots of people will say to me, well, we know it's white van man. That's the sort of person who comes to our kind of whatever, our business. Say, I'm going to stick with a holiday example. These are the people who buy holidays from us, but we don't know how to find them. Well, this is how you find them. They belong to group number 8, blue collar enterprise. So you just market to blue collar enterprise. I'll explain how you do that later on. This group have got good disposable income. Obviously, they're not in the top 10%, but they've still got a lot of money. So they can still, this is a good juicy group because it's 11%, so it's sizable, and they have got money to spend, and they do spend money. All of these groups other than the top group tend to be quite credit card friendly as well. They tend to kind of spend money on credit, and I think that's something you should always start to tap into. We know that cash isn't great for people. We know they might be putting stuff on credit cards. Well, if we give them a payment plan, that's even more attractive. And I think this is something that a lot of people in 2013 should be looking at, is can we offer our services on a payment plan? Because a lot of these groups are maxing out credit cards, so they're not opposed to credit, but they're not, they've got money, but they're spending beyond their means sometimes. That's just a societal trend of most of these groups. So, how can we tap into that? And if I was a lot of businesses targeting consumers rather than businesses, I would be asking that question. How can we give people payment plans? And I'm going to be talking about that a lot more in some future videos. I'm going to be doing a video at Christmas where I'm going to be talking about the trends for 2013, and one of the core areas is kind of tapping into the fact that we're in a bad credit economy, and turn that from a disadvantage, people don't want to spend money, to an advantage. And this group, number 8, number 2, the happy families, group number 3, the suburban comfort, this group here, number 8, the blue collar enterprise, they're all people that respond very well to that. Apparently they read the Sun and the high TV viewing, so if you want to reach them, that's the kind of channels. Again, not so internet savvy. This will change, obviously, in 15 years time. These people probably will be, because these are probably 35 to 45, and they're not so much on the internet. Whereas obviously people today who are 25 who'll be 40 in 15 years time will be. But for now, for 2012, 2013, when you're trying to do your marketing, this might not necessarily be the group. I don't think this is a group for many people. They call it Twilight Subsistence. Basically, it's kind of poor pensioners in poor housing. It's kind of your average pensioner. But it's only 4% of the population, so it's difficult to know whose target market this would be unless you help pensioners. There are businesses, if you sell mobility scooters, this is your group. But it's a very small group and it doesn't have very much disposable income, so it's less likely to be a target market for you just because it's so small. But if it is kind of poor pensioners, if they're the people who spend money with you, this is your group and this is how you target them. And great news if that is your group, because it's only 4% of the population, so really easy to target, very inexpensive. They read the Sun and high TV viewing, probably because they're pensioners, so they don't get out much, so that probably doesn't surprise you, but not Sky Television. So that limits your available advertising channels a lot, because, as I say, on some of the networks on Sky it can be a lot cheaper than advertising on ITV during Coronation Street. Okay, this is a more kind of affluent retirement. They call it kind of grey perspectives, which is an interesting name for a group, but it's 8%, so it's a reasonable size. But these are more your kind of comfortably retired. And they have traditional values. They're certainly not on the internet. They read the Daily Telegraph or the Daily Mail. So they're quite conservative. So let's imagine that you're a cruise company, you're a travel company and you're selling cruises. Well, group number 9 is probably less likely, and it's a smaller group than this 10th group here, because they're 8% and they're actually quite comfortable. They've got a bit of money. So if you're selling cruises, these might be the people you want to target. So, I'm presuming older people go on cruises. I've no proof of that. I'm just making terrible assumptions here. But you see what I mean? You will know who your customers are. When I'm going through these groups, you will recognise these. There will be people watching this video going, yes, they're the people for us. It might be people who buy conservatories. Maybe people buying conservatories are this group. So you sell to this group. Maybe you sell security equipment for the home, burglar alarms and double lock doors and all the rest of it. And we know that this group is most likely to buy them. It's not happy families, which you might imagine. They want to keep their kids safe at night. It's older people who, you feel less agile, you're less kind of, comfortable. A 70-year-old is unlikely to fend off a burglar in the way that a 35-year-old probably would. So they're more worried about home security. Well, if you're in that business, this is an 8% of the population, a juicy group, and they've got some money and they can buy from you. And they read the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph, so you know how to reach them. They're not on the internet, so they might respond to traditional advertising or direct mail or newspaper advertising, but they're not going to be on the internet. So if you are that type of business, why bother having a website? Or why bother having a good website and spending money on the internet? Just target these group in the kind of channels that they exist in. So it's a kind of decent-sized group, this. A lot more profitable than you might imagine. These are people who, they've got a decent pension, and they're going to spend it. They're not going to save it up for a rainy day. This group, trends are changing a lot as well. This group, as I said, are more likely to spend their money than they would have been 30 years ago. They're more likely to look at equity release. So it's an interesting group. And the final group, it's only 5% of the population, and really this is a bit of a, it's kind of rural, and it's a bit of an umbrella group, this. I often find this group is not particularly successful because it's actually quite nebulous. They call it rural isolation. It's basically people who live in a rural area. It tends to be low incomes, but that's only a trend just because most of the population has a low income, proportionately speaking. So this group tends to be, but there's still people with decent income. And you know, they're good on non-liquid assets, as in rural homes are worth a lot of money. And they've got traditional values. Apparently they're on the internet, which might surprise you. You might imagine it would be something else. And they listen to Radio 4, which is interesting, but no help whatsoever when it comes to marketing, because you can't advertise on Radio 4. But it just tells you where they are. So, you know, you can probably profile from people who listen to Radio 4 what type of newspapers, what type of magazines, what types of places they might go to, what type of people they are. But like I say, I find this group the worst of all of them because it's just basically people who live rurally. Now, if you want to sell stuff to rural people, you know, maybe you maintain gardens and you want nice rural gardens because there's more money in it and people are more likely to pay for ongoing maintenance. This is a group for you, but for a lot of people, it's so broad, it doesn't help so much. But you know, it's still better if you are trying to target rural people. At least you can say, well, it's 5% of the population rather than everybody, but it is probably the broadest of the groups. Okay, here's a quick graph which shows you for the percentage of population how these groups kind of pan out, if you will. And you can easily see that the biggest group is the ties of community. Now that's great if you are a local business for local people, because it's 16% of the population. It's closely followed by the suburban comforts, who are 15%. Other large groups are the symbols of success for happy families, the blue-collar enterprise. They're the other kind of major groups. And then our smaller groups are like the welfare-dependent and the borderline people, the Twilight Subsistence people and the rural isolation and the grey perspectives. They're a little bit kind of higher, but at 8%. Now, what does this mean? Well, it just means really, like I say, if your group is either the Grey Perspectives or the Tides of Community, for Tides of Community your group's twice the size, so that's good news, because more customers, you can target these customers and they're going to buy from you, so more customers equals more profit. So that is good news. However, you know, it doesn't really matter so much, because even if your group is the rural isolation, well, it's 5%, so you're going to cut out all of that waste in your marketing. Now, you probably need to have a national perspective and a local perspective, or just accept that, you know, it's not going to be huge income compared to some of the groups which are 3 times the size. And this next one shows us via the different media, so their primary media. Now, this is fascinating. Now, we all believe everything's going online, as I just said, but actually, only for half of these groups is internet a primary medium. TV is still up there. Everyone keeps telling me, you know, all the advertising is going online, and a lot is. But look at TV, holding its own there. But look at the Sun newspaper. You know, it's nearly as big as the internet on its own. If this is one medium, the internet is everything. It's Google. It's all of the websites. It's all of the social media. It's several media rolled into one. And the Sun on its own is still holding its own. Incredible. And like I say, TV's pretty high. And then Sky Television's, it's pretty low there, isn't it? And, you know, some of the lesser newspapers you can imagine, you know, you look at the Daily Mail, is the biggest, but then the Mirror, and then the Guardian, the Times, the Daily Telegraph. But I think this is more interesting just to show that when you combine the Sun and the TV together, they'd be off the chart, wouldn't they, compared to the internet? And if you had to split the internet into Google, websites, video websites and social media, you know, it'd probably be down there with like the Guardian and the Times. So you've got to be a lot more niche. So I think this is quite illuminating and quite interesting, and probably, you know, looks at a few myths and kind of busts them a little bit. And this just gives you just a summary, just for you to look at, which just tells you their percentage of the population. So you can have a look at this and you can see how which of the groups will work for you. And this is your challenge. You need to look at this and you need to say, right, of all of the 11 groups, which 1 or 2 or 3, I'd imagine it wouldn't be more than 3 of these groups, it might just be one of them, but which of these groups looks like our best customers? So when I went through those 11 slides, which of those descriptions looked like your customers? You know, which of those represent those people who make money in your business. You know, they make money for you, and you need to put those together. So once you identify, and let's say it's happy families, great. You now know that's 10.7% of the population, 11% of the population, and you know they do Sky TV and the internet, and you can extrapolate out from that. Very powerful indeed. So do you see how you've taken from a massive market down? Now in the opening I said that you all know about target markets by now, but we're going to drill down into more detail. This is just the first video, but as you can see, this is a lot more scientific. Now once you've got these different groups, once you say to me it's happy families, they're my target market, next week and in future videos I'm going to show you how you can buy data just for that group. So I've not told you just to identify that group for the sake of it. Now that you know that that's happy families, I will show you how you can build a marketing campaign that just targets exclusively on happy families, just 11% of the population, and excludes the 89% of the rest of them, which are a waste of your marketing budget. So that brings us to the end of today's recording, and hopefully this far into the journey you see that mass marketing is not productive. And you know about target markets, but you now know how to drill into a lot more detail, and you know the size of that group, you know their values, and you know their chosen media. And we're going to drill more detail into those groups next week, and we're going to look at how you can start to use them in your marketing campaigns. So I hope this has been useful. I know it can be quite politically incorrect, or it's putting people in boxes. Please don't get any hang-ups about that. You're basically saying who looks like my customers, my best customers, you know, in percentage terms, and that's a group I want to be talking to. So between now and next week, I strongly encourage you to listen to this video again, particularly the bit where we look at the 11 groups and say which of those groups match your business. So next week I want you to have in front of you a list that says, you know, happy families is my primary group, and grey perspectives also are pretty good for me, and they're my secondary group. And I'll tell you what to do with that information. So I hope this has been useful. Thank you very much for listening. You'll hear from me again in a week's time, so between now and then, have a great time in business, and goodbye for now.